Okay, cool. Happy Friday. Midterm grades were super high. I was very impressed. Hopefully you all saw the EdSTEM announcement I posted Wednesday evening, and I just linked your ID so that your name was kind of anonymous. Yeah, like coding part especially, it looked like people did well. Written part, we'll go over the answers to the written part on Wednesday next week. And then the part that I'll share is if you didn't do as well as you wanted on the coding part, I released this, let me save it. So in your lessons tab, you can go to midterm makeup, and like you can get half the points back essentially for the coding problems that you missed. So if you got like a 4 out of 10 on one of the coding problems, you can redo it here. I've released the autograder test here so you can actually test it to make sure that you do it correctly. And as long as you get it submitted by Friday, you'll get back half the points. And you don't have to do all 3 problems. Like if you got a 10 out of 10 on one of them and you just want to get points back on the other 2, you can just do the other 2. For the written part, there won't be any like points back because that's kind of just you either got it right or you didn't. That's not really as much room to give makeup there. But yeah, any questions on that? Overall, really cool to see how far people have come in the last 5 weeks. Even like this soccer standings problem, where it's like you had to print out the team name and the X points. I remember like the first 2 labs, people were really struggling with that concept of like getting input and then actually using that input in a variable and then printing it out again. And so to see people like really understand that now and be able to do it in a timed exam was super cool to see. If else for this problem, while loop for this one. So we've learned a lot these last 5 weeks, and it was cool to be able to see people apply it on an exam. Hopefully everything I said leading up to it was fair. I said if you could do the homeworks and labs, you should be able to do the exam. Hopefully you felt that was a fair assessment. I tried to make the difficulty the same as the homeworks for this. Okay, so for today, for Wordle, if everything makes sense today and you pay attention, I'm hoping the time outside of class will maybe just be an hour to make your starter doc. So let's first start with playing. If you've already played today's Wordle, don't spoil it. So as a reminder, we're trying to guess the secret word, and we're going to get hints for our guesses. So if we guess the word weary, and it tells us the W is green, then that means that in the answer, W appears in the 0th position. If the letter ends up being yellow, like the I, then it means that the letter I is in the answer, but in a different position than what we guessed. And then we're going to use the color red. I know in actual Wordle they use like this gray, but it's very hard to distinguish, so we're just going to make it red. And it's red if the letter doesn't exist in the answer. Any questions there? Okay, so let's play. Anyone have a 5-letter word to start off with?
Clown.
Clown?
No, about.
About? Cool. Okay, so we got the O. What does it mean if it's green?
Incorrectly.
Yep, so our answer is going to have O in the 2nd position. The reason why I'm saying 2nd is because in CS we start counting from 0. So the A is in the 0th position, B is in the 1st, O is in the 2nd, U is in the 3rd, T is in the 4th. So we know the O is in the 2nd position. Anyone have another guess?
Rooms.
Rooms? Like R-O-M-S?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we got an R and an S. Not in those positions, but we know there is an R and an S in the answer. Other guesses?
Yeah, I'll give a guess, but I already did.
Okay. Appreciate you not spoiling it. This one's kind of a hard one.
Let's try like crows.
Okay. Just to see.
No, that S is in the wrong.
Yes, but it could give us some information.
Okay.
Okay. So we got. So yeah.
So R would be.
We know the R has to be one of these last two now.
But I have the C and the S as well.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe because I was just looking at the soccer score example, but we could try something like score. Let's see if it gets us closer.
Oh.
Almost, not quite. I wouldn't give you the answer. Score. Nice. Sweet. Okay. Everyone understands the mechanics? How we're playing? Okay. So in groups, I'm gonna have you just really make sure we fully get it. So if our answer is scorn, we'll use their example. So in groups, I want you to think about like an answer where all the letters in the guess would be green, an answer where all the letters are yellow, an answer where all the letters are red, and then an answer where there's at least one green, one yellow, and one red. Yep. All right, I'll have you two go together here.
Well, like Wordle is not gonna win with it's not gonna let you put it in. It's not gonna let you just put in random letters here.
Yeah. Oh
Oh. All letters are red. If you have those letters.
Oh yeah.
You just have to use some of those letters. I'll say S and D the first part, like you can see.
I know for all the others it's good too.
Five letter gets you syrup, green, yellow, and red. Or not syrup, but
Temps.
Wait, no.
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. So let's bring it back together. I think people are generally on the right track here in the conversation. So what's a 5-letter guess where all the letters are green? Yep. And we saw that in our code here, right? When we guessed the word scorn, all the letters ended up being marked as green. Cool. 5-letter guess where all the letters are yellow.
Corns.
Yep. So we can kind of take the word and just move everything over one. So we know like the C is in the word scorn, but in our guess it's in the 0th position, whereas in the answer it's in the 1st position. And that'd be the same for all of them. Sweet. All right, 5-letter guess where all the letters are red.
Sharp.
I think there's an R in there.
Oh, frick.
Yeah.
I said temps.
Big.
Temps.
T-M-P-S.
S will be yellow, right?
Baked.
Baked. Yep. So baked is okay because none of these letters show up in scorn. Let's think about this as a computer, right? So this letter B, how would we know to mark this letter B as red?
It doesn't equal any of the characters in the correct answer.
Yeah, so this letter B is not in any of the letters in scorn. let's be even more explicit. How would we break that down even more? So us as humans can tell the letter B is not in scoring. How is the computer making sure that B is not in scoring?
We put it like equal to each of the characters in the string.
Yeah, it will go character by character, right? We'll take this letter B and we'll see if B doesn't equal the letter S, and B does not equal the letter C, and this letter does not equal the letter O, right? So it's like 5 and statements, essentially, where we're checking, does the given letter not equal any letter in the answer? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and then what's an example that has all 3? Which one? Front. Yep. Cool. Any other examples? Crows. Yep. Cool. So let's do the example with front, just to see what our code will look like. So essentially, for our output, we're going to do it in the console. So we're going to keep asking the user for a guess until they get it right. So we're going to ask the user, what is your 5-letter guess? They might type in the word front. And then for our output, we want to print each of those letters. Sorry, we'll do it in order. So we'll do like F, and then a dash, and what the color should be. So if our answer is scorn, and we're trying to check the letter F, what color should F be? Yeah, because F is not in the answer scorn. And then R, yep, because it's in the answer scorn, but it's in the wrong position. O, cool, because O is in the same position for both. N, yellow, and T. All right. So that would be the output, and then we would ask the user for another 5-letter guess. And then they might guess crown, and then we'll print the letters in crown with what their associated colors are. For a stretch opportunity, if you want to actually color the text in the console, I can show you how to do that, but this would be like kind of the default solution that we're looking for. And then if you want to do it as a stretch, you can also actually color the text. Cool. So do people understand what our input and output is going to look like for this project? Yep. Okay. Cool. So let's now look into how we're actually going to set up the code. Let's start with thinking about it from a mathematical standpoint. So if we were to use all 6 guesses, I know in the example we did, how many guesses did we end up using? We only used 5. We didn't end up using the 6th row, but let's just consider the case where all 6 guesses are used. How many letters would we have to check to see what color to make it? 30. How did we get 30? Yeah, so we have 6 guesses, and for each of those 6 guesses, we're checking 5 letters. So we have a 6x5 grid. I know the lines are super faint, but if you were to come up and count it, there's 30 grids on this chart, because 6 rows, 5 columns. So we're checking up to 30 letters, and let's break it down into 2 parts. We'll first start with the rows, and then we'll figure out how to do the columns. So for the rows, we'll first ignore whether the answer is correct or not, and we'll just assume that every time we play Wordle, we'll allow the user to make 6 guesses. So first off, is this going to be a validation or a counting problem? Counting problem, and why is it? Like, how many times is this loop going to run? It's going to run 6 times. Cool. So in groups, I'll have you all come up with 2 things. First, what is the condition that should go in this while loop? And the second is, what line should go here to make sure we don't have an infinite loop? So you can use the same pieces of paper that I already passed out. It's in groups, kind of think about
this is CN.
I'm definitely.
This is supposed to be.
So it's like it's counting as the no guesses equal to
This is going to be kind of a borderline case. I'd encourage you, once you have your condition, to try counting how many times your loop is actually going to run.
No, it should be. Yes, I guess minus one is super, it only gets 6
Right, so yeah.
Okay, so let's bring it back. So first off, what's the condition that we want to make sure this loop runs 6 times? Yeah, Marcus?
We said that it was num guesses is less than or equal to 6.
Okay, num guesses is less than or equal to 6. We'll come back and check on that. I heard a group mention greater than, but in this case, we would have an infinite, or it wouldn't even run. If we said like greater than 6 and num guesses is 0 the first time, this loop would never run. So we want it to be less than, or maybe less than or equal to, we'll check. And then what line should go here to make sure we don't have an infinite loop?
Num guesses equals num guesses possible.
Exactly. So every time the user makes a guess, we want to increase the num guesses counter. Num guesses stands for number of guesses, right? Okay. And then the question is whether there should be a less than or equal to or a less than 6. And we can count the loop. So because num guesses starts at 0 and the user only makes their first guess inside the loop, the first time num guesses 0 is less than 6, so the loop runs once, and then we make num guesses 1. So the second time when 1 is less than 6, we run. Then when 2 is less than 6, 3 is less than 6, 4 is less than 6, 5 is less than 6, and then at the end of the loop, num guesses is going to get changed to 6, but we don't want to run it again. So I know that was a little bit confusing to kind of just do on my hands here, but in this case, it would be num guesses is less than 6, because after the user has made 6 guesses, we don't want to run this loop again. Right? So when the user makes their 6th guess and we increase num guesses to 6, we don't want to run the loop one more time. So we would exit. Any questions here? I know a lot of times we see out and see in something before the while loop. In this case, we're kind of doing everything inside the while loop. And so that's why we started num guesses at 0 instead of 1, was because the first guess only happened inside this while loop. Yeah.
Oh, now I understand. Okay.
All right. Does that make sense? Everyone good with this part? Okay. So now there's actually 2 things we want to keep playing the game, because we noticed in this example here, we didn't actually come and use this 6th guess. Like num guesses was 5, which 5 is less than 6. So why didn't we run the loop one more time?
So we got all green.
Yeah, we got the answer correct, right? If the user gets the answer correct on the 2nd try, we don't want him to keep having to make guesses just to fill up the 6 guesses. We want to tell him the game's over. So we kind of have 2 conditions that have to be true. One is that num guesses is less than 6, because that way we know that they haven't lost yet. And then what's the other condition we need to make sure that we keep playing the game? Yeah. Well.
Or guess equals tau.
Okay. And we'll just generalize it to like this variable answer. Okay, and you said or guess equals tau. But I guess we want this condition to be true if we want to keep playing. So if the user guesses it correctly, we actually want to stop there. We don't want it to be true. Yeah, so this is, yeah, so this is actually, so we're combining a counting problem now with a validation problem. And with validation, we said we want it to be true if the input is bad. And so in this case, the input is bad if guess doesn't equal answer. And then why is this an and statement and not an or statement? Yeah, we need both of them to be true to keep getting guesses from the user. And you can see that when you play the game Wordle, both these conditions are being checked every time. Because either if guesses is already equal to 6, we don't want the user to make a 7th guess. Yeah.
Meaning that we're going to have 2 while loops for the correct and not for the correct.
So it's all going to be in just one condition.
Or in one while loop.
It's just going to be one while loop. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's a really good clarification. Like, you can have multiple conditions in the same like while loop, and what our while loop is doing in this context is just saying keep getting a new guess. So we don't want two separate while loops because then like it won't sync together. Like there's just one while loop to get each guess. Okay. This is pretty nuanced. Does this make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Why is it and not or for the condition?
Sure. So we can use a real example that we had here. So in this line, num guesses is equal to 5. And so we can check our condition. Is 5 less than 6? Okay, so that's true. And then let's say we had it as or. And does guess not equal answer? In this case, where guess does equal answer, what does that come out to? Like this would be false at that part.
Okay.
And so we have a true and we have a false. And we're trying to determine if we should keep playing the game. If we do true or false, the answer is going to be true, and we're going to keep playing the game. And we're going to ask the user for another guess. But really, we need both of them to be true. Yeah. Another way you can think about it contextually is we want to keep playing the game if the user has not lost and they have not won. So as long as both of them are true, we want to keep playing. And as soon as one of them's true, if the user's lost or the user is won, then we stop. Okay. Any questions there? Sweet. So the one thing you'll notice is at the end of this while loop, so it's still inside the while loop, every time the user makes a guess, because right now they can make up to 6 guesses potentially, we want to print out the colored letters. So this output that we had here, for every guess, we want to print out this red, yellow, green, yellow, red, whatever it is. So we're actually going to have another nested statement in here. So just note this next section, all the code we're going to talk about in the next section is going to go inside of this while loop. Okay, and we'll revisit that. So printing the colored letters in guess. Let's just do a quick recap on string indexing. So again, with strings, when they get stored in memory, the letters will all get stored next to each other, and we start counting in computer science from 0. So essentially, we're going to get this variable guess. We're going to store the user's input. Let's say the user typed in stove. That would get stored in the variable guess. And let's say we wanted to get each letter. Oh, oops. All right, everyone close your eyes really quick. I forgot to delete that from the previous one. Okay, so if we had a new variable called letter, we can assign it the data type char. So char, we very briefly talked about it, but a char can just hold one letter or one symbol, and it will be represented with single quotes if you were to literally assign a value to it. And so if we wanted to say, get the 0th letter of guess, what would that give us? Yeah, so what this is saying is, guess is the name of our string variable. You use the square brackets, and then you put the number to get the letter that you want. And so when we said guess of 0, that corresponded to this capital S. If we wanted to get guess of 1, T, O, V, and E. What happens if we do guess of 5? Yeah, so it'll probably just give us this null terminator, so it won't give us anything. So this is a super hard concept for people new to CS to remember, is that we start counting from 0, and so the last number that we can use is kind of the length of the string minus 1. So like the length of this string is 5 letters, so the last index we can use is 5 minus 1, which is 4. All right. So one thing you'll notice is we're repeating the same line of code multiple times. Anytime you see the same code repeating a bunch of times, that's a good indication that you should be using a loop. So in this case, if we wanted to get all the letters in guess, first off, is this going to be a counting problem or a validation problem? I heard some validations. Why validation if it's a validation?
It's like checking if this is equal to that, right?
For now, we're just gonna. I guess so when I talk about counting or validation, it's more referring to how many times is this loop gonna run. Validation is usually like the number of times it runs will depend on the user input, and a counting one we know exactly how many times it will run. Yeah. So in this case, well, not 6. How many letters are gonna be in guess? 5. Like in Wordle, every guess is gonna be 5 letters long. So if we have a guess, how many times is this loop gonna run? 5 times, yeah. So like, essentially we saw it here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get each of the 5 letters. Okay, so again in groups, 3 things you need to figure out this time. What is the condition to make this run 5 times? What should go here to actually get the letter each time, to get every letter in like stove or whatever's in guess? And then what should go at the end to make sure that we don't have an infinite loop. So this was the last one in groups. I'll give you all 2 minutes.
I think, yeah, I think we're talking about like so like within the row of letters are typed out. What condition? So it would be while is it char letter?
And then
I guess
I know that in the
Okay,
it's gonna be index plus 1.
letter doesn't
And the
does not
condition is
equal
index is
does not equal
less than
char.
I mean,
less than equal to 5.
This is counting. So it's like
How can we use like
Print letter.
We're trying to check
That's gonna be another.
we're checking whether the letter is right,
Or
right?
see
Or are
how-
we counting it? Or how much counting?
I think we're counting how many times.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's 5 letters.
Five letters per guess. So if letter is less than 5, but it's saying print this letter. Because the rest of it's asking for the correct color. So
Okay.
it's not just how many letters you need to be sure whether they're in the right place.
Yeah, this part we'll do a little bit later. For now, we'll just focus on these 2. So, okay, first part. So again, the part that we're kind of trying to simulate is like getting this letter is equal to, we're trying to get each letter in the word, right? But instead of writing it out like this, we want to use index. So index is equal to 0 to start. What line can we put at the end of the loop to make sure we get each of those index numbers? Yeah, so we want to increase index by 1 each time in the loop. So at the first time in the loop, index is 0, then we increase it by 1, so index becomes 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Yep. What condition can we put to make sure we don't go past 4? Yeah, so as a condition, we can put while index is less than or equal to 4. You can also put index is less than 5 if you prefer. Either of those will work. And then how do we actually get the letter using the index? This is how we did it before with like literal numbers. How can we use the variable index now? So that's what we're doing at the end. So that index goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But how can we now get the letter?
We gotta use gas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Guess of.
guess of 0.
Okay, but guess of 0 will always give us S.
Right.
So how can we get each of the different letters?
Guess 0, common guess 1, guess 2, guess 3, guess 4. No.
That'll give us all 5 letters every time, though. We just want to get 1 letter each time in the loop.
So letter equals. So letter equals guess. So I think a plus.
Okay, so I think people are kind of close. Okay. So we got the index is less than or equal to 4. because we want index to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So hopefully people follow the index less than or equal to 4, and index is equal to index plus 1. That's what allows index to go from 0 to 4. And so now all we're saying is, instead of explicitly saying guess of 0, we're putting this variable index. So let's step through it. The first time, index is 0. Is that less than or equal to 4? 0 less than or equal to 4? True?
Yes.
So what happens in this line when index is 0? What is letter going to be equal
That
to?
is going to be equal to S.
Yeah, because we're going to have letter is equal to guess of 0 the first time this loop runs. And in the example where guess is stove, what is guess of 0? S. And then index increases by 1. So what's the value of index now? Or just 1 right now. We come back to the top of the loop. 1 is less than or equal to 4. And now our new letter is equal to what?
T.
Because we have letter is equal to guess of 1. And that gives us t. Right? Then index increases by 1 to 2. 2 is less than or equal to 4. Letter is now equal to guess of 2. What was guess of 2? O. Right? So are people seeing how we got from like these 5 lines to the while loop? Right? Instead of saying the number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we just replace the number with the variable index. Because index every time in the loop becomes 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Right? This is super critical. Are there questions here?
So like you can call out like variables in char. Meaning like if it's like guess of 0, you can call out like a variable that you already determined in there.
Yeah, because yes, exactly. Like when the code sees a variable, like when the code sees this, all it's saying is like index. I know there's some memory location for this. What is the value? So because it sees a variable, it's really just seeing the value 0 or 1 or 2. Right? Yeah, it's getting mapped to some value. Right? All right. Any other questions on this? Okay. So now the cool thing is, like, with our letter, now we can set up like an if, else statement inside of here to now check, should we be printing out that letter as green, yellow, or red? Because the output that we were trying to do way back here, we now know how to get letter each time. I guess this example is doing front, but if it was like stove, right? Now we know like we already get letter is equal to guess of index, so we know like this first letter or 0th letter is S. And now we just have to decide whether to print out green, yellow, or red, right? Okay, so let's do some live coding just to see how the 2 while loops go together. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to do, everyone can see the code all right?
Yes.
Okay. The first thing we wanted to do was the outer while loop. So we had something like num guesses is equal to 0. And then we also had something like int index is equal to 0. So we won't worry about validating the answer right now. We're just going to assume the user is always going to make 6 guesses. So what's the first while loop condition we can do to make sure we run 6 times?
Num guesses is less than 6.
Yep. Num guesses is less than 6. Okay. For this problem, there's going to be 3 levels of indentation. So indentation is super important, otherwise you won't be able to debug your code. I know in earlier assignments, you didn't have to indent and it was still okay. But for this one, you're going to have problems, so I want to give some tips. The first is, we know curly braces come after, and I see people often write like 1 curly brace, and then like they start coding, and then they forget to add the other curly brace later. And then their code doesn't work. And then when I point it out, they kind of just like add the curly brace wherever. So like they might just like add it here. It's like they might like add it here, and then it's confusing to see what it actually maps to. Every time you create a while loop or an if statement, add both curly braces. Add the opening and the close, and then hit enter a couple times, and make sure it's lined up properly before you start coding. So now we know all the code we write is part of this while loop. And we know this indentation is correct because this W, like the W in while, is lined up with this curly brace. Whereas this curly brace is lined up with this int main statement. So that's how we can tell where a piece of code starts and ends. Are there any questions there? Okay, so while num guesses is less than 6, we'll ask user for a guess. And then what do we need to do to num guesses after we ask the user for a guess?
We need to send it out.
Just related to num guesses.
So we need to do num guesses is equal to num guesses plus 1.
Yeah, because we want to keep track. Now that the user's made a guess, after their first guess, num guesses should now be equal to 1. After they make their second guess, it'll be equal to 2. After they make their third guess, it'll be equal to 3. Cool. Okay, so we got the user's guess. Now, for a given guess, we have to check each of the letters in guess. So what's the keyword we can put here to get each of the letters? Yep, so we'll use stuff with index. What's the keyword if we want to do something multiple times? While. So we're going to do another while loop inside of the other while loop. Okay? And what's our condition here to check each of the letters? Index is less than what? 5. So you can either do less than or equal to 4 or less than 5. And then note, I put the 2 curly braces, I hit enter, and I make sure the curly brace is lined up with the while. Yep. Okay. So in here, we'll say, we'll essentially get the letter. So we would have something like char letter. And letter is equal to what?
Letter of index.
Sorry, so we'll also have like a variable for string guess.
You get the guess of index.
Yeah, so like we would ask the user for the guess here, and then we're going to use that guess in this inner loop to get the letter, right? Okay, and then just for us to visualize the code, I'm just going to print out guess number and we're also going to print out index. Okay. So let's step through this and see. Boom, boom, boom. Sweet. I have to zoom out a tiny bit. Okay. So one thing you'll notice, we're gonna have way more steps now because we have like nested loops. I know a lot of times our steps are like way less than that. This one is saying we might have up to 504, so we'll see. Okay, so first part here, num guesses is gonna be set to 0. We store that in our memory. Index is gonna be equal to 0 as well. So while num guesses is less than 6, we ask the user for a guess. And now that they've made a guess, num guesses is going to increase to 1. And so here, while index is less than 5. Is that true? Yep, 0 is less than 5. So we would get whatever letter is at guess position 0. In this case, we didn't actually see in guess, so it's not going to be anything. And then we're going to print out the guess and the letter. So in this console here, we're going to have guess is 1, letter index is 0. In our Wordle example, what letter here corresponds to guess 1, letter 0? Yeah, so guess 1 is this first guess in the first row. letter 0 in guess 1 is this letter A. Everyone follow? Okay. So then, note that once this while loop ends, we come back and check it again. So index is still less than 5. That's what we're checking. Is 1 less than 5?
Yes.
It is. So we forgot to increase index. Edit this code. We have to increase index by 1 each time, right? Otherwise, we'll have an infinite loop. Okay. So we'll step through it again. Index first time is 0. We print out guess 1, letter index 0. Now we increase index by 1. So what value is index going to become? 1. Cool. 1 is less than 5. And so we'll print out here guess 1 and letter 1, letter index 1. So in this example, what's guess 1, letter 1? Yeah, so guess 1 is still about, letter 1 is B. We're going to increase index again to 2. What is guess 1, letter 2? Yeah, so note how we're just going across the row. With this nested loop, we're essentially just seeing every letter in guess. And so if we're to like quickly step through it a bunch, so, right, we have guess 1, letter 1, guess 1, letter 2, guess 1, letter 3. That's A, B, O, U. Then the last one, when it's T. So now after we've printed out T, index is going to be equal to 5. So what's going to happen at this line here when index is 5?
It's probably gonna go back up to like 11.
Yeah, so 5 is less than 5. That's false. So we come to 19. There's nothing after 19, so we come to 20. And at 20, we just follow up the curly brace. So we come up to line 11. People understand that? Okay. So just to show it, it comes back to 11. Num guesses, 1 is less than 6. Is that true? Okay, so what line do we go to next?
13.
Yeah, 12 and 13, where we ask the user for another guess, right? And num guesses is 2. So now, like, the user might type in rooms as the second guess. And now we essentially want to do the same thing, where we check each letter in rooms. But what's going to happen right now? What's the value of index?
Value of index is 5 right now.
The value of index is still 5. So it still thinks like we're at the end here of this word. So what's going to happen if 5 is less than 5?
So back to 11.
Yeah, so we're going to ask the user for another guess without actually processing rooms. So what do we need to fix in our code to make sure that we start checking at the beginning of the word again?
Make that
Yeah. Essentially, before we start the next loop, we need index to get reset to 0. So it's like a snake. Index, num guesses was 1. Index went from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like sitting on 5 now. And so when the user asks for another guess, we also need to set index back to 0. So that we can again go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ask the user for another guess, set index back to 0. Do people follow that?
Yes.
Okay. So just to, this time we'll step through it much faster, just to show it. Okay, so really focus on the output here. So the first time when, so we're on guess 1, which is like row 1, column 0. Then row 1, column 1, so the A and then the B. Then the O to get the second letter in about. Then the U to get the third position in about. Then the T to get the fourth letter in about. And now we ask the user for another guess. And the user might type in the word rooms. So now we're dealing with rooms as our second guess. We set the index back to 0 so that we can go, instead of starting here, we set the index back to 0 to start off at the R. And so now when we print out guess, we're on guess 2, letter index 0, right? And then we can keep stepping through. So then guess 2, letter index 1 to get the O. Then guess 2, index 2 to get the second O. Then guess 2, letter 3 to get the letter M, right? And then we can keep going and then get the third guess. And when we get the third guess, then it gets reset to 0, right? And the third guess, letter 0 is C. So does everyone understand how this code inside here is going to run 30 times? It's going to run potentially 6 times for the number of guesses, times 5 times for each letter. And so really, in your code, once you add the validation stuff in this outer loop, it's going to be 5 times the number of guesses, is how many times this code is going to run. This while loop will always run 5 times. This one will run number of guesses times. So 5 times number of guesses. So in our code here, there were 5 guesses. So 5 times 5, we would have checked 25 letters. Yep. Okay. We're going to go over nested while loops in more detail on Wednesday's lecture. I will just put up the kind of slide for it. The syntax is exactly the same. Just really make sure you get your indentation correct and your curly braces correct. The code in here is going to run how many ever times this loop runs times how many ever times this loop runs. And that's the power of nested loops. With just 2 little loops, we were able to run 30 times for our code. So instead of writing the same code 30 times, we just have to write it once and then run it in these 2 loops. Does that make sense to people? Okay. I think this concept is going to be the hardest part of Wordle. If you understand this, the other parts are all just basic if statements and printing, right? But this nested loop concept is a hard concept for students to get. So we're going to work more with it next week. What's due? Wordle starter doc is going to be due Wednesday. Make sure you book an appointment by this date. You can book your appointments for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or even before that if there's stuff open. What you need to do for the starter doc. So go to your lessons page. There's the Wordle project here. And then just click on this link for the starter doc. Essentially for the starter doc, just follow the steps. So you'll make a copy of this doc. So file, make a copy, and then you'll be able to edit it yourself. This first part we kind of did in class, so you can either use the examples we did today or come up with your own examples. Make sure you go and read the project doc. If you have any questions, add it here. And then I kind of break down the problem like we did in rock, paper, scissors. So if you just had one letter, how would you check if it's green, yellow, or red? This will just be if, else. And then this part here, we kind of did the while loop stuff. Your pseudocode will be a lot of what we did today. Of like, you have your outer while loop, then your inner while loop, and then you have your if statement inside of all of that. The final thing is once you're done with this doc, I put a link here to make an appointment with a Googler TA. You come to this page and just click on one of their booking appointment links. And you can just book an appointment and just put in it's for the Wordle project, and it will send you an email with the Meet link. The grading for this part is just going to be graded on effort. It's going to be worth 20 points. So as long as you attempt each of the sections, and the sections you don't know, you at least put down a question or you put down what you tried, you'll get full credit. But make sure you book the appointment so that you get the points, right? This should be one of the easier 20 points that you get. So really make sure you do it. If today made sense, I would expect the doc to take about an hour to complete. Yep. Cool. Any questions? Alrighty. Have a good 4-day weekend.